This is a step-by-step guide of how to sail from the Bahamas to the Turks and Caicos and finally into the Dominican Republic. I'm by no means a professional sailor, but having just sailed this route over the past couple of weeks, I can say for sure that it works. I've broken down this topic into 3 easy steps. Number 1, the sailing portion. Weather windows, anchorages, navigation, that sort of stuff. Number 2, checking in and out of the countries, aka bureaucracy and paperwork fun. And number 3, why you should hang around Luperon. It's a lot of fun for very little money. Let's get started.
The route I took and will be talking about is affectionately known as the Thorny Path. It's called that because it's unpleasant. And it's unpleasant because the wind and the swell are usually coming from an easterly direction that you have to head straight into. But fear not, there is a way. The trade winds of the Caribbean usually blow out of the east, but sometimes, more or less often depending on where you're coming from and what time of year, they take a break and the wind will come from another direction. This window in the weather is known as a weather window. Take it towards your next planned anchorage. This is the best plan to not entirely hate your life while you begin the Thorny Path. You'll want to wait for these windows in the comfort from a nice anchorage. Now from the Bahamas to the Turks and Caicos to the Dominican Republic, there are quite a few anchorages you can pick from. Here are the anchorages that I waited out in and what I thought of them. Clarence Town, Long Island. This is a pretty good anchorage with plenty of space, a lot of room if you have a deep draft or if you have a shallow draft, many places more to anchor if you have a shallower draft. I managed to get right up into the town, which you have to be very careful because there is a marina and a town dock right nearby. Neither of those you can get too close to. I was there for probably 2 weeks and I could have been there another 2 weeks longer. It was a really nice place that had a decent amount of provisions and supplies nearby. From there I took a day sail over to Pittstown, Crooked Island. Off the coast of there we had great protection from easterly winds, but really there would have been no protection from any other wind direction. The area had good holding for any draft of any boat, but not great protection had the wind come from another direction. From there I took an overnight sail up around Crooked Island, up around Auckland Island, down and around to Mayaguana, the least populated and least supplied islands of any of the family islands in the Bahamas. Though I will say the locals there were as friendly as I have ever seen in the Bahamas, and they truly have a place in my heart. But if you do run into trouble out there, you will find sparse amounts of supplies. The anchorage itself was incredibly rolly, but it was beautiful. Eventually we took a weather window out of there over to the Turks and Caicos. We sailed all the way across the Turks and Caicos to Cockburn Harbor, which had decent enough protection from the swell, but no real protection from the wind. But I was happy to be there as opposed to Abrams Bay with the swell that would hit my boat there. However, the Turks and Caicos, especially Cockburn Harbor, I found to be really not that great of a place to wait around in. I really just got my boat ready to move on from there, so I did not spend much time. From there, I then took a very long and very bad weather window to Luperon, Dominican Republic. I was trying to pick up a friend who was flying into the country, and I don't recommend setting timetables to flights, because flights do not care about the weather nearly as much as a sailboat does. However, once into Luperon, Dominican Republic, and that's where I'm filming this video from right now, absolutely fallen in love with the place, and I wish I could spend more time here, to be honest. The anchorage and really the mooring field at only $3 a day is just beautiful, but I will have a whole section on why I like Luperon later. And I do want to state that there are many other anchorages that I could have stayed at had the weather been different. To be honest, I was aiming for Ocean World, not Luperon, when I was coming to the Dominican Republic. So always have a fallback plan ready in case you can't make the direction you're trying for. And I'd also like to point out that there is a current, not a very strong one, but a light current that does run across the north coast of the Dominican Republic with the trade winds. So although you might have the wind angle over that 100+ nautical mile stretch, you will find your sail drift to be fairly severe, as I did. No problem though, aim for Ocean World, come into Luperon. For navigation, I have never used paper charts. They were a little outdated as I got into sailing, and I've never had the need to. I do not have a chart plotter on my boat. I don't really feel like I have the need to. I instead actually use Navionics off of many different tablets if I want, but usually I just use my single cell phone that I carry with me every day. I highly recommend Navionics to any boater, no matter what you have. It's just one more source of information in case your main system goes down. And with chart plotters, I noticed that many boats will have electrical problems and for some reason they will go down. I've really had no problems with Navionics. I have it on about 10 different devices on my boat, and it works great for me. As well, the community setting allows me to see what other sailors have thought about anchorages and places from any point of view, which I find to be very helpful. For the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos, I highly recommend getting yourself a copy of the Explorer charts. They are a cruising guide and navigational chart plotter, kind of all in one book that has very good pages that are water resistant. I've carried them throughout my years in the Bahamas and just recently sold them to some other cruisers. They go for I think about $100 each, and you need 3 of them to complete all the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos, or just get the chart books for whichever section of the Bahamas you're going to. The last thing I use for navigation that I do recommend, funny enough, is Google Earth and Bing Maps. I find it's great just to look at a satellite view of things, especially in the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos, where the water is so clear that you can see individual things going on. It's not a guarantee or maybe a great idea to be doing it as compared to navigational charts, but I find it to be very useful. I use a few different sources to get my weather. Probably the main one I use is the Windy app. There's 2 different ones, a red one, Windy, which is correlated to the website. I use that one from time to time as well, but I really like the Windy app, which is a blue icon and looks like this when you're viewing it on your phone. As well, I like to use Pocket Grib, another app on my phone. It'll show it like this, like a Grib style file. This takes barely any data and it will save weather up to I think about 4 days ahead of time, which is very useful if I'm in an area that doesn't have good cell phone reception. The other ways I like to get weather are Chris Parker. He's one of the best known weathermen for the whole area of the Bahamas throughout into the Caribbean. You have to subscribe to his services. And then the last one is just talking to other sailors. See what other sailors in your Anchorage have to say, what weather windows they're jumping on. Make sure your sailing ability and your sailing vessel line up with that, and then go for it. So here is the closing tidbits of information. Preserve your easterly advantage as much as possible. You can always go westerly later, but you can't always go easterly now. So stay as much east as you can as weather will allow. If you have to motor because there's no wind, motor. Going up against no wind is much better than going up against 20 knots of wind and 8-foot waves right in your face. Trust me. Do not be on a timetable. You should be waiting patiently in an anchorage for the correct weather window that suits your ability and your vessel's capabilities. Don't hurry these things. Always try to have a few drop-off points along your route. To be honest with you, I was aiming for Ocean World. I was not aiming for Loop Run. And also, to be honest with you, if I had drifted any further, I forget the name of the anchorage, but I would have ended around the corner from here and then later made Loop Run. So always have a few drop-off points in case weather or unforeseen circumstances cause you have to bear off downwind. It's always a solid plan. Most sailors break something along this route. I know I did. Don't kick yourself too bad about it. It happens. Boats are meant to be used. It's no problem. You get to learn how to fix it. The locals in places I've talked about are absolutely wonderful. When, not if, you break something, be nice, be courteous, and I'm sure they'll be more than helpful.